Hi guys, you're in the right place if you want to learn how to draw by understanding what you're looking at rather than breaking things down into shapes. And today we're going to be doing this brown creeper. And a big thank you to Brian Shoughton for letting us use your gorgeous photo as today's reference. So you need a scrap piece of paper and a pen that is it's going to be fairly easy for you to control, so that light pressure, you get some fairly good faint shading, and then with heavier pressure, you can get a nice deep contrast. So get yourself set up, and just while you're getting organized, I'll talk a little bit about today's bird. The creepers, they're really they're not that big. They have this long, narrow bill that goes into the bark to get the insects. And these birds typically fly in at the bottom of the trunk, and they work around in a corkscrew up the tree. So it's funny because it's like I never see them fly in. They're just like all of a sudden they're there on the tree trunk, and then they're hopping up and around in a corkscrew fashion, searching for insects. And then I never see them fly off either. They're really, really amazing. So okay, as you can see, the bird hugs the tree fairly closely, and the markings on its back really blend into the bark. So when they're still, it's like they blend in so well, it's like you can barely see them, and it's only when they start hopping from one position to the next that catches your eye, and it's like, oh, there's a little creeper. So what else do we need to sort of like consider with this guy? If you want to do a sketch of a creeper on like a gift card, or anything that's with your artwork, you must do the tree trunk. Okay, these guys, like, I've never ever seen them perching on a branch. I'm sure they must, but you never see it. So for today's tutorial, we're also going to be doing a big section of the bark for and this would be a very heavy tree as well that they're on. So I'm just nattering away. For sure you're set up by now. So how about we start how about we start here at the base of the bill, and you see how he's kind of narrow, and there's this slight curve of the head, and this is so typical. See how his back kind of, it's like a hunch, and then there's another one here. So your objective today, if you can have him sort of a little bit thin with this double bump in the back for the hunch of the back, and then the rest of his wings, I think that would be a really good accomplishment. And then we'll be sure to stick on a narrow, long bill on our sketch. So where you start on your paper, just not really too close to the edge or whatever, but let's just go here with a little bit of these fuzzy feathers underneath the throat, and see how there's just a slight curve there, and then his tummy goes up against the branch. And opposite that, if we kind of go, and watch your angle, because if you go straight across, then that's going to do a different tilt for the head. We want to have his head tilted toward the branch, so when you go across, make sure you go up a little bit, and that's going to sort of determine the curve of his head. So we'll just take this around his forehead, not too much, around the top of the head, And then the back of the neck, kind of stop there. And then with his bill, see how there's a slight curve there? So you don't want to have a straight line. We want to put in a slight curve to the lower section of the bill, and then a little bit more pronounced curve on the top section. Because he's got to be able to get that bill in to all the nooks and crannies in the bark to get those insects. And I know I said that I don't often see them flying into the tree, which is true. I usually they catch my eye when I see them hopping on the tree trunk. But it's funny watching them when they do fly into the tree, because it's like a magnet. They just come bang, they just come straight into the tree, and then all of a sudden they're there. There's nothing like graceful or dainty about it. It's like a sponge that's just tossed to the tree and then sticks, and then there they are. As you can tell, I just want to maybe position the eye a little bit. Next. And see how it's not a perfect circle, because with the angle and what we've got with it, it's kind of like this with a curve on the top. All these different angles really show the orientation of the head. And be sure to leave a white section on the eyeball itself where the light is reflecting off the curve. And he does have, and while we're here, why don't we just put in some of the light shading off the bill in front of the eye, because if we do this, then hopefully we're not going to get too confused with some of his markings as we move throughout the bird. And then he does have a little bit of I was going to say tiger stripes, that's not right, but they do have so many mottled feathers that make them really kind of like blend in to the different shades of the bark. As the throat is nice and curved. And then this goes into his tummy, which is right up against the bark here. And this pale peach right here is his foot. So the leg seems short. This is the actual joint for the foot. And we've got a toe here, part of a toe here, and then the third toe at the front. And then the great big toe at the back, and look at the size of this claw. Okay, so when you're coming down here to do his tummy, leave a little gap, and we'll worry about his foot and everything later, but we'll just get our positioning in. Oh, it seems like I'm drawing a little bit smaller today. Well, that's a shocker. Now, at the bottom of his throat, see where that kind of lines up with the first hump of his back. If you see a bird going up a tree trunk, it'll be a creeper. If you see a bird coming down a tree trunk, it'll likely be a little nuthatch. So we've got one bump for his little hunch, and then the second for the bottom. And see how vertical he is? I don't know how my spacing is going to be. I don't want to commit to the bottom of the wing. So we've got his, I'm going to leave a gap there, and then just finish off his tummy, this part here. And then we're going to have the looser, all these loose feathers that are so typical at the behind the foot and at the base of his belly, where the actual body begins to curve. And then we've got the looser bum feathers. Technical term. And then see how wide this is here? So make sure you didn't bring this in too far. We can always fix that later and push that out, but we just want to make sure we've got some good width. This is just very, very loose, free feathers, and then this is the tail feather, the underneath tail feather. And we'll just watch the width of the tail there. Now, this long tail, as far as I know, it's not like a brace, like a downy woodpecker. Okay, so he really does use his body weight and his big claws on his feet to jump around on the branch or on the bark. Whereas a little downy woodpecker with a shorter tail pushes it into the bark so to act as stability, so the bird can brace itself while it's putting force against the bark to get the insects. But this is not used in the same way, so that affects the way we sketch it, because there's like very little tension between the tail feathers and the bark. It's not like he's pushing his tail in there. So this curve I don't really like on mine. And we want to have everything kind of finishing up. This is where my crappy printer is kind of a little bit helpful with where to have our markings. Okay, so maybe before we go any further, I would like to make sure that, just take a second to make sure you're happy kind of with the curve of the head, and then the back of the neck, and then the top of the back, and then that curve in, and then this bottom curve. And then we can just go ahead and just very lightly start shading his tummy and around his foot, just to give some texture to where all these loose feathers are kind of like lying and pointing in different directions, which means some of them are overlapping, which is why there's some darker parts. Yeah, it might make his throat a little bit. So if you've got a good pen with light pressure, where you can just do this little faint shading, so faint that I can't even see it, then we're not going to commit to anything dark just yet. Oh, come on. Let's see this. Okay. Light pressure is almost like no pressure, which is not what I want. I'll just put a little bit extra pressure, get this pen, get this ink flowing again. But there is quite a bit of tan, darker brown, a little bit of black. So we have to be careful that we don't go too heavy for our lighter shades, because then we're going to be in trouble when it's time to do the darker brown and then add in the black. Once again, am I working outside the... Well, you don't need to see what I'm doing anyway. And then it's dark here because this is the curve of the body, and then there's shadow being cast by the wing. Actually, let's sort of work on putting lining up his facial features, and just following some of these darker lines around his face. This pattern of patchwork, which really is so fabulous about keeping him so camouflaged against the branch. This kind of works its way down a little bit. And it's just right above the shoulder. And then the wing, where it's black. So the wing starts above where you want to have the foot. Now, if you want to, and if you have time, you can be very meticulous and go through all his different little markings, or you can just have an understanding of, just take your time, see what's actually going on with his back, and all these little lighter patches and these rivers of darker feathers to break it up. And anything that you do on your sketch is just, as long as you give the impression of that, it's going to really illustrate his markings. think as long as it's broken up a little bit and the dark lines are joined, it should work. Slightly irregular. Just do the best you can. And see how some of the brown patches are larger than others, so you can do that too. And then use heavier pressure where it's black on these flight feathers. And we can change the size of the wing later if you feel like you haven't made it large enough. But we do need to have this kind of black border for his wing. And then we just want to carry these black feather tips down. And then there's like the gold. And whether you're using a blue pen or a black one, it doesn't matter. Because if you're getting the contrast in here, that's going to be good. And then if that part's worked out okay, let's just carry this down a little bit. Is everybody concentrating as much as I am? I think I've made his fluffy bum feathers too big. I got too carried away. Okay, let's go back and add more of the sort of the lighter pattern to his back. I got too screwed up here. It's also confusing for me to try to follow. I don't even know where I am. Okay. Okay, if you're a little muddled like I am, what we can do is go down here. Should have some nice rounded tips to some of these feathers. I don't, and we'll just put in some of our borders. What's going on back here? Some darker tips for these feathers here. Okay, and if his back is too like bare, then just go and just add some more sections with light shading to break it up. I think as long as you just don't use your pen and go everywhere, you'll be okay. Okay, let's tackle his foot. I say as I want to do more on the wing. See how this has like a nice curve here that kind of matches his belly. And mine, I just want to bring out a little bit more. Just want more of a curve to this. So I'm just going to change this border. You do the same. If his wing is been too up and down in your sketch, just change the angle a little bit so it has a little bit more of a curve. When I did a practice sketch, I did his tummy way too big, so then I put the tree trunk all the way through his stomach to make his stomach smaller. So there's all sorts of ways to cheat. Let's, okay, I said his foot, and then we're totally not doing his foot, but you know, come on. You know me. So let's, I really want you to do a good job on his bill, okay? I want you to have a really nice curve for the top. And if you end up making the bill too fat, don't worry about it. The curve is more important. So just get that in there. It's like a little needle, okay? He's got to eat all those little bugs. And then just a curve to the bottom part of the bill as well. And then we'll be happy. He's going to look like a little creeper. And while you're at it, see how the end of the bill is just like a little bit darker? Let's just very carefully shade in some of it. And then we can work on just darkening this patch in front of his eye. And just deepening some of the colors, the shading that we've done around his eye. And see how he's got this eye ring, which is very typical of a lot of birds, but not always so visible. So keep your pen away from that and just do a very, very small line around the eyeball. And give the impression of the ring. And then darken his eyeball as well. Have him get some nice depth there. I think I want to make his eye a little bit bigger. Okay, and then since we're working on his face, not his foot, let's just, how do I want to do this? Oh, look, working upside down. You're thinking, oh, it is Elaine, not an imposter. And can you just use your pen and do a couple heavier marks? Just not too many, to give him some contrast along the top of his head. Just very, very faint around his eye. Because this is a nice tan. So we don't want to get too carried away by doing those markings. But if we have some good contrast where it's dark, and then along the top of his head, now in my sketch, he needs to be thicker. So see how thick he is from the bottom of the throat to the shoulder start at the back of the head, and see how narrow mine is. So if yours, you just change that angle a little bit if you need to thicken them up there. And then it really kind of emphasizes this hunch that he's got on his upper back. And see in the photograph how we can really almost see this black line. So it's fair to put that on your sketch, because these are going to be the darker markings that break up his back and help him blend in with the bark. So normally, you know, it's not cool to be doing an outline for your bird, but for this little guy along his back, it's totally fair. Do you have a better line for the tail than I do? I was too, you know, loose with my pen. Okay. I'm not avoiding the foot. though it sure seems like I am. Do you have some good shading on his tummy? And just some broken up feathers? Because not everything is flat. Okay, so see, first of all, position. So about halfway down the wing, this is the big like joint on his foot here. We don't see any of his leg. So just choose try to be correct in where you position it. And let's go about here, and we're just gonna curve this joint. And what we see is the joint going straight into the third toe over here. And it's short, of course, because it's the outside one. And we've got a fairly large claw. Now his long middle toe, you know what's surprising? This long middle toe isn't nearly as long as the birds who grip a branch. So it's still going to be longer than the other toes. Now I know by doing the toes we're kind of like committed to the bark and stuff like that, but that's okay, we can handle it. And then this tiny little bump right here, this tiny little bump is his inner toe. A little bit of the claw. This toe is fatter than that. Now, from here, what I'd like you to do is you've got to draw the bottom part of his pad that comes out and in the bottom part of the toe. So take that out. This is going to be the bottom part of his pad. Bottom part of the foot, little knob underneath. And then all this is claw. I'll just take this out. Make it almost as long. It's okay if it's a little bit longer than the toe itself. Well, that's way too fat. Put the tendon in there, a little wider there. Okay, now let's spend the next 10 minutes fixing what we've done. The claw comes out of the top part of the toe, a little pad underneath, tendon, markings, and a better curve to his foot. This toe comes out. Oh, for once drawing upside down didn't help, because I've wrecked this toe. Just one. Well, you know what? If you make a colossal mess of it, just make sure the bark goes straight through that foot. Okay. Now, I think that's okay for for we've got the weight of the foot, we've got a little bit of shading underneath, we've got this idea of his pad and stuff like that. So now what you need to do is fix his tummy feathers around his foot and put in a bit more shading if you need to, so you've got the proper angles and stuff. Have I kind of like left you alone to work on the foot when I've gone off and done a little bit of other? He's a little dumpy. I feel like I should squish him. Well, like I did with my practice sketch, I can always like have the tree branch. Okay, let's actually work on putting in the bark. So we got to make sure that we don't cram the tree right into his bill. But we do want the bark to come fairly close. Because they do hug the tree. Like, I'm not joking, they're like smacked up against it. So let's run this past him like that. Too nervous about getting too close. And then take the bark past his body and then past the tail. And see, if you've done this like me, where he's too thick right here, we're gonna guess what? It's turning into bark. Okay, so we got to just look at all this nice texture that we can add to our brand. Oh, come on, like we will. Give me a couple of years and then we're gonna do fabulous, because you really should pay attention to every aspect of your sketch and stuff. But if you'd like to have a 4-hour video where we're actually paying attention to bark, I could do that too. But for now, it's our bird skills that I'm trying to develop. So if you've got them smacked up against the tree trunk, that's fabulous. That's what you want. None of this dainty perching on a branch stuff for these guys. I want to draw upside down. I'm sorry, I need to. My poor brain has had enough of all this upright nonsense. So around his tail, you know, it's okay to just leave sort of an unshaded border. I don't know why, but like I've done that with some of my work where it's actually like white around it, and it seems like it should be so wrong, but actually like it's effective. It doesn't look so bad in a sketch. I don't know, but we can do that here. So see how, like I said before about his tummy, I didn't like what I'd done with the taking his feathers in too much, so I'm just going to add some texture of the tree to bust up his profile a little bit. Get it more the shape that I want. And these guys are like, they're always on like the spruce trees or the Norways, the tree trunks that have lots of nooks and crannies in the bark where all their little insects can hide. I never see a creeper on the neighbor's beech tree with all its smooth bark. They're always coming over here. So, since this is fun and relaxing, with your bark, just make some darker sections to show like the depth. And you know, you can bust up the profile if you like. I mean, he's on this bark for a reason, right? Not that particularly. Oh, okay. I did this in my practice sketch. I got so carried away doing the branch that I completely colored over all his toes. So what you can do is just like the same as the tail, just leave a very small border. And I want to actually just add some texture to his, and just maybe pick up a little bit more color and shading on his toes to distinguish them from the the tree trunk. Yeah, I was blah, 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 enjoying myself shading all the bark. And it's like, oh, there goes a toe. Oh, there goes another toe. So, learn from my mistakes. So yeah, like if you ever do one of these guys, see how long his tail is? You gotta make sure that you do them on a heavy bark. And this, is there a way I can just sort of, I've kind of lost this big toe here. I just want to maybe add a bit of shading to it. Bring it out a little bit more. Of course, these claws are so long, they would actually be inside the bark in the little nook and cranny. Okay. That's enough for the tree. You see how his throat, it just kind of comes down. So it's okay to give him a few more loose feathers around his throat if you need to take that down a little bit more. And otherwise, are you happy with your work? It's good if you are, but it's also good if you're not, because it means that, you know, you want to practice more. I'm going to shade him a little bit more on his curve of his body and stuff. It's hard because he's a tan and he's a gold, and don't want to do too much where yellow kind of like blends away. I don't know, I think he's pretty cute. But I have to make sure that he's like, I'm happy with him, because I can't, like, once I turn off the camera, I can't cheat and do more work, because in the thumbnail, you guys are going to say, oh, she cheated. The thumbnail looks different from where she stopped. I think I'm just going to leave him like this, because I think he's pretty good. If you want to drive yourself nuts, you can go back and do all the little markings on his back. But if you've just broken it up the way I have, that's going to be enough to give the impression. Okay. What do you think? I think he's not too bad. All right, you guys. As always, thank you so much for your company. Certainly like hanging out with you. So, nobody ever sends me their work. Hopefully that'll change. I'd like to see the little creeper that you've done. So, you can email me, find me on Facebook, blah, blah. All right, have a great day. I'll see you next time.